Another name that I think Pittsburgh Steelers fans have an iffy relationship with is Jason La Canfora, who loves to talk his smack on the Pittsburgh Steelers, loves to take his digs when it comes to this football team, but at the same time always has a little bit of insight. And this time he says that there's another move coming. On the In the Huddle podcast, he said, quote, "For me, there's a piece of information we don't have yet, which is, do they trade for a wide receiver before the draft? It would not surprise me if they did that tomorrow, if they did the Wednesday before the draft, if they did it while they were on the clock, if they did it in the run up to the draft that Thursday. I know that they're really trying to make something happen here." We were looking at it as of right now, where the Pittsburgh Steelers were moving on from their wide receiver trades, that Brandon Ayuk was in the rearview mirror, that, thoughts of John Mechie and Noah Brown and all those names that we were tossing out there seemingly died off. Not anymore. It appears that the Pittsburgh Steelers are still hunting for a wide receiver. Jerry Dulac said it the other day that, there is another move maybe of some significance coming for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it's really just the question of who are they looking for and who are they going to get? And is it going to be a Brandon Ayuk? Has that ship sailed, or is it going to be another name? I got a list. I think obviously you got to start with the two that we've mentioned already, which is Brandon Ayuk and T. Higgins. But I got other names that I think are just as interesting, if not more interesting, for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Do you still put Brandon Ayuk and T. Higgins on a list of possibilities, or do you just look at it and say that ship has sailed? Let's come up with some other options, and I have some other options for you.
I feel like the price for those guys has just continued to remain steady, because if the price was reasonable, why wouldn't the Steelers have already gone out and done it? I mean, you look at the receiver core that the Steelers have, they have a clear need to bring in a number 2 or a number 1 that is 1A, 1B with George Pickens. So if the price was reasonable, you'd have to imagine the Steelers would have already pulled the trigger on a trade like that. And you'd have to imagine that they have already talked to those teams, Cincinnati and San Francisco respectively, about what those prices could be. So it doesn't feel to me like that's something in the realm of possibility. It'd be great because both of those receivers are tremendously talented. But at the same time, we've gotten to a point with those names where it seems like they are the cream of the crop who's potentially available, but it doesn't seem like something that the Steelers can afford, or the other teams are willing to lower their price for the Steelers to be able to afford.
Yeah, I agree. And I think both guys come up with massive contracts. I think that's the difference here. Is there are a lot of names, and I'm going to toss out a couple of names that I don't think are as expensive long-term as Brandon Ayuk and T. Higgins. Whereas, and I think those guys, you're going to have to trade a boatload of picks and compensation. And then at the same time, you're going to have to sign them to a long-term deal that the Pittsburgh Steelers just frankly can't afford. Right now, if this was Kenny Pickett's team, if this was Kenny Pickett and he's got another 2 years on his rookie deal, maybe another 3 years on his rookie deal, 2, I guess this is season, no, 3. So he'd have possibly 3 more seasons on his rookie deal. You got room to work with. You don't have that same room to work with knowing that Justin Fields and Russell Wilson are both free agents next season, and you got to figure out your quarterback position. Maybe that's a rookie and maybe that solves things. Maybe that's a cheap deal for Justin Fields. Maybe that's a massive deal for Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. You don't know yet, so you can't make those moves. I agree with you. I think both of those names are behind us at this point. I don't see either of them coming to Pittsburgh. I will give you a couple that I think could end up in Pittsburgh. We've obviously talked about John Mechie. I'm not ruling John Mechie out. I think that makes too much sense. I think that the Steelers are going to look at it and say that's a guy with a lot of upside. And I'm not saying he's their first option. I'm not even saying he's their second option. I'm just saying he's probably on a list of possibilities when they're thinking, hey, look, we want to make a trade. Why not go get John Mechie? If things aren't working out, if the rest of these people on this list do not work in their favor, I could see Mechie being a last resort. I'm going to toss 3 more names out here. Let me hear what one you think probably the most realistic. Davante Adams, that we have talked about a number of times. I mean, the Raiders are trending upwards, I guess, with Antonio Pierce, but they still have a lot of questions. If they don't get a quarterback, is Aiden O'Connell still their only quarterback over in Vegas? I'm not totally sold that he's looking to just finish his career on a really bad team. Maybe he wants to come over to Pittsburgh. Maybe he wants to play with the Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. I'm sure he wants to play with Mike Tomlin. I could see Davante Adams being on that list. Cortland Sutton's another name. Denver is cleaning house. They could care less. Sean Payton is in, I want my team. Nobody here was my team. Get rid of them all mode, which I respect. That happens all the time when coaches come in here, especially coaches with as much pressure and have to redo as much as Sean Payton has to redo. I could see Courtland Sutton being a name to watch, although that one injury written, it kind of plays the same game as George Pickens a little bit. Could be an iffy one, but I think that he's an option. Has a relationship with Russell Wilson, obviously. They played together in his 2 years with Russ. He had 829 yards, which is his second best season, and 772 yards with 10 touchdowns last season. Not a bad name to have there, especially if he's got a good relationship with your quarterback. And then Tyler Lockett, who also has a relationship with good old Russell Wilson, who during their time together, I mean, he put up some numbers. He was a dude who caught every single football. Came out of nowhere. He was the underdog story. Tyler Lockett was a dude to watch. Him, Davante Adams, both 31 years old, which is old, but not super old for a wide receiver. I don't know. You hear those three names. Am I crazy on all of them, or do any of them make some kind of sense?
Well, you got two former teammates of Russell Wilson, so I think right there you do have the connection. And Davante Adams, there's some smoke there with him in Las Vegas, because not only is it, Antonio Pierce's team, not only is it a team that right now doesn't really have a quarterback, it's a team that when Davante Adams initially went to Vegas, he was going to rejoin Derek Carr. He was going to rejoin his college quarterback. And when Carr left, the question was, well, how is Davante Adams going to deal with this? And he dealt with it. He's a professional. And I think that says a lot about him. But if you look at what he's been able to do, even at 31 years old, 4 straight seasons of over 100 receptions and over 1,000 yards, not to mention double digits in touchdowns in 3 of those last 4. And in 5 of the last 6, he has the triple digits in catches and obviously 1,000 yards receiving. The dude is a beast. The dude is a technician. He is still one of the best in the league. And if it wasn't for him playing on a horrible team in the Las Vegas Raiders, a lot more people would be talking about Davante Adams as a potential trade piece. The only problem I have with him is that contract. And it's the same with all of these guys. I mean, Courtland Sutton, we saw somebody earlier in the comments here, Thomas, saying it's like a $15 million cap hit for Courtland Sutton. Davante Adams, I think his cap hit is somewhere around $25 million. So again, it's a lot of money for a lot of these receivers. But when it comes to what you'd get back on the field, Adams is 100% worth it. Lockett, to me, is 100% worth it, especially for the change of pace that he would bring in a receiver core with a guy like George Pickens and what he could do for a guy like Calvin Austin, another undersized guy that can play the X. I think that would be huge. So all 3 of these names make sense to me. Whether or not the Penguins, Jesus, I got to switch gears here. I just came off of that one. Whether or not the Steelers can afford it is another question.
So let me ask this. Can you look up Davante Adams and could you look up all 3 of these contracts? Davante Adams, Tyler Lockett, Courtland Sutton. I want to know how many years are left on all of them. Because if it's Davante Adams for 1 year, I don't think his trade value is incredibly high. I don't think you're looking at Davante Adams giving up a first-round pick. Maybe you're giving up a second-round pick. But I think the Stephon Diggs trade kind of set the stone there where it's like, this guy's he's younger. He's probably just as productive. Maybe Davante Adams could go for an early third and you have 2 thirds, so maybe a third and something. I could see that working out. If his contract is only maybe a 1 year, maybe a 2-year contract where you're not giving up a boatload of time and a boatload of money. The other 2, Courtland Sutton, I believe, is entering the final year of his deal, $15 million, which is not terribly expensive. Like, you got to remember that. I get it. $15 million is a lot of money for a wide receiver. That's what you were going to pay Deontay Johnson. Why wouldn't you pay that to another guy? There's a massive difference between Brandon Ayuk making $30 million a year and Courtland Sutton making $15 million a year, especially if it's a shorter term deal. And then there's no way Tyler Lockett's making a boatload of money.
So you have Courtland Sutton, who has this year and next on his contract at a little over $17 million as far as a cap hit. Tyler Lockett.
What was that? A little over how many?
17.
Okay.
About 17.3 right now. Tyler Lockett's contract, he has an out after this season, but he has another year after this that goes up to $30 million if you don't take that out.
Yeah, no chance.
So no chance that the Steelers would pick that up. And then Davante Adams, same thing. He has $25 million cap hit this year, potential out after the year. But if you hold on to him, it's $44 million cap hit for the next 2 seasons after that.
Yeah, that'll never happen either. So that's what I'm saying. I think that you could make a deal with the Raiders. I think you could call the Las Vegas Raiders and say, "Hey, look, we want Davante Adams. We'll give you a third round pick, and we'll take that cap hit. You get an out. You restructure that contract. You got Davante Adams for another 2 years on a reasonably priced deal." This is what I mean by this. Davante Adams is a guy that at this point in his career has made a boatload of money. And I'm not trying to speak for him because I'm always pro player. Go get your bag. You're only here for a limited amount of time. Go make some money. I wouldn't be surprised if Davante Adams wants to come to a team that he could win a Super Bowl on. And then when he sees that he could win a Super Bowl on that team, why not try and just stick it out and win more Super Bowls? I think you could look at Davante Adams and say that's a dude who's going to come and maybe he signs for $20 million a season after this year for, I don't know, 2 more years. And then he could see where he goes from there. Maybe just a 1 year, 18 to $20 million deal, almost fully guaranteed. I'd be open to that too. I think there's a massive difference between 20 and $30 million. What you can do with that $10 million is your entire NFL draft class. You can sign your entire draft class in that $10 million. You could work it out, and the Steelers always love to work it out, where you can make some of this a signing bonus and you don't got to take it on. As Cody mentions in the chat, chances are when you make a trade, you don't take on all that salary cap. You're going to work that out in the trade. So the Steelers aren't going to take a major hit with some of these guys. That's the difference. Like Brandon Ayuk is a long-term, this is a lot of money moving forward. T. Higgins this is a lot of money moving forward, not necessarily right now. The other guys, I think it's reverse. It's, this is a decent chunk of change today. It's not as much change tomorrow. And I think you can make that work. Tyler Lockett at $30 million is insane. I'd remove that name from the list right this very second, just because there's no chance that I'm paying Tyler Lockett $30 million. Like it's not going to happen. Cortland Sutton for 17. I think you could rework that deal, extend him for another year or two and lower that to 15, maybe $14 million with the good signing bonus so that he's getting a lot of that guaranteed up front. I don't think he'd be opposed to that. And I think Denver take on a lot of that hit as well because they're just looking to get rid of some money. I could see that one working out too. Davante Adams is the name that I'd say watch. I'd say I'm not ruling out a Davante Adams trade as we sit here right now. I think that Davante Adams is a dude who makes a lot of sense for his price tag right now, has an out next season, and you could figure that out. Omar Khan could come in here. There could be an understanding where if we're not giving up a bunch, I think it could work in their favor. I don't know. Out of those three, you had to pick who's the most realistic.
The most realistic I was going to say Lockett, but seeing that $30 million cap hit, I know you can make it work around, but that's starting from there with the Tyler Lockett is, like you said, I'm going to strike that off the list, or at the very least, move it down the list a couple of pegs. But it honestly, and it's kind of weird to say, Davante Adams seems like the most realistic.
Yes, I agree. I think that he's a guy he can work out so well in Pittsburgh, and they're probably looking for the same things. And he could come in here and mentor George Pickens and Calvin Austin and whoever the rookie wide receivers. Why not? Why not make that trade?
It's an interesting dynamic, and it's an interesting mindset shift because you look back last year, the year before that, it was, all right, the Steelers are going young on offense. They're building for the future. They're trying to build something sustainable. And all of a sudden, you're going for it this year. And it's like almost like the LA Rams, maybe not to that extent, because they said, screw them kids. But the Steelers are at a point now where they're saying it's about this year. It's about right now. And they're going for it. So maybe with that shift in mindset, that leads towards them going after a Davante Adams, or them going after somebody who will not only come in here and bring his talent, but we talked about his professionalism and how he handled the Derek Carr situation. That would help in spades for a guy like George Pickens.
Yep. He's got everything you're looking for. I think that's a massive move for the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you could, just think about it the way exactly how you just laid it out there. The Steelers are looking for a Super Bowl right now. This is no longer a waiting situation. The Steelers want to win. They want to win today. You'd give up a third round pick for a win today. You'd give up a third round pick for Davante Adams, even if you knew you were just going to get him for a year. You'd feel comfortable doing that. If it was a first round pick, you wouldn't. If it was a second round pick, you'd say, that's iffy. A third round pick, I'm giving it up and I'm saying, yep, sounds good. It's fine. It's no big deal. We're going to try to win a Super Bowl right now. and we think that's our best opportunity to do so. And then hopefully you could still draft somebody, and you're in a really good spot if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers.